Welcome to the Real Exchange, you guys. Today we have a distinguished guest. We go way back. Tell us your name and where you're from.
My name is Wyatt Moulds, and I'm from Ellisville, Mississippi, originally from Rose Hill, Mississippi, in Jasper County, but I've lived in Ellisville since 1980.
hmm Okay. Tell us a little about your background and what you do.
Well, my background is I've been in education all my life. I've just finished my 45th year as a public school teacher in Mississippi,
Wow.
and I teach history since 1982. I've taught history at Jones County Junior College.
Okay. That's impressive. That is really impressive. So, from my understanding, your expertise in the realm of history led you to be chosen to do some work on a Universal Picture film called Free State of Jones, starring Matthew McConaughey. Can you tell us how you got involved with the film? Like, what was that process like?
Well, this is just by happenstance that it all came about.
Hmm.
In 2006, I was teaching class and lecturing in one of my classes, and all of a sudden, one of the administrators knocks on the door, and he says that, Dr. Whitehead wants you in the office now. Dr. Whitehead was the president of the college at the time, and he said, Whitehead wants you over there now, let him go. And I thought, okay, that might mean that I'm about to be fired. But I get over there, and he introduces me to this guy. And this guy started asking me some questions about the history of Jones County. And, being a historian, I knew a little bit about it. And he asked me, what do you think about Newt Knight? And my response to him was that Newt did not have a dog in the hunt. And he said, what do you mean by that? And I said, he did not want to take part in a war that was being fought to protect the slave property rights of rich people.
hmm
And so by the end of the day, I was working for Universal Pictures.
Nice. That's crazy. Um, so, can you give us some background on the movie, like what it's about? Who are the main characters?
Yeah, the background, the movie is about a revolt that took place during the Civil War against the Confederacy. This yeoman farmer in Jones County by the name of Newt Knight, he led a revolt against the Confederacy, against the Confederate States of America.
hmm
Um, Initially, he was in the Confederate Army, and he deserted in 1862. In October of 1862, he comes back to Jones County, and he finds that the women and children are starving, and that the so-called home guard, the Confederate cavalry, has taken their food and all of this, and this motivates him to basically wage this revolt against the Confederacy. He's forced back into the Army in 1863. In March of 1863, he's arrested for deserting in 1862, and but he's under arrest. But Vicksburg, city of Vicksburg, fell to the Union Army in 1863, in July of 1863. Shortly after that, Newt is back in Jones County, and he is 100%, he has had all he wants of the Confederate States of America. He is in full revolt, waging his revolt against the Confederates. So it's a mini civil war within a civil war. See?
Okay. Okay.
Uh,
Uh,
the actor in this was actually two. I had the opportunity to work with both of them, Matthew McConaughey and he was Newt Knight. He was an excellent Newt Knight. Looks a lot like him, and he, my job was to help instruct him about, what it would have been like to be a 19th century yeoman farmer, to recreate the life of the yeoman farmer for him. In other words, how Newt would have lived as a farmer in the 19th century. I did that, and uh, another actor that was in the movie was the lovely Miss Gugu Mbatha-Raw. She's a British actress, biracial, and she, of course, would portray Rachel Knight. This, of course, would be Newt's wife. You know, uh, actually, we never were able to find a marriage license because those were, very hard to come by in the 19th century. But, you know, his Newt's obituary said that he was married to her, so we go by that. I worked with Gugu. I had the opportunity to take her all over Jones County,
Nice.
and she asked me on one occasion, "How do you get the feel for the piney woods, this section of the state?" And I had an axe in my truck, and I walked out, and there was a piece of pine, what we call down here kindling wood, in my backyard, and I busted some splinters off of it, and I said, smell this. And that pine wood, she said that she had it on her nightstand every
Oh,
night while the movie was being filmed.
oh,
A very sweet lady. And then another actor who was Moses Washington in the movie. His name was Mahershala Ali. He's, of course, a very good actor. He's had several Oscar nominations, or at least one Oscar nomination. But had the opportunity to work with him and visit with him and a lot of the other minor actors as well.
hmm
Matthew, of course, was the top attraction.
yes, yeah, definitely. So you got to mingle with some of the greats. That's an awesome opportunity. Like share your knowledge, share your culture with them, just like an exchange of ideas and life, and that's really great. I hope to
Matthew's,
I hope to do that one day.
Matthew's a real good guy.
Yeah.
There doesn't seem to be anything fake or phony about him. He's just really straightforward and honest. He's humble. You
hmm
know, it's there was no indication that he was vain or ever full of himself or anything like that. He's just a very humble man. You know,
Yeah. That's really good to know because a lot of times, like, people they'll come into contact with these actors and they'll have these horrible attitudes, but it's good to know that you've had this personal experience with him and you can testify that he has a good character. Like,
right?
and I like him
I
on
don't.
screen, and so that just makes me like him even more now that you say that.
Well, something else. I don't know if he would want me to mention this because I don't know, but I will anyway. I ate lunch with him, on a daily basis for about 5 weeks in the summer of 2015, and he says grace before every meal. You know,
Hmm.
we've been led to believe all of these, Hollywood actors are nothing but atheists and agnostics and whatever, But Matthew is, he's a good guy. He's been uh, a Christian and he follows his beliefs.
Awesome. That's awesome. That's great to know. So, so when I was watching this movie, like I noticed that there's this fascinating pioneering relationship between Newt and his troops, and Newt and Rachel. Newt was a leader in setting like a positive standard for relationships between whites and blacks in such a racist climate. Can you speak more on the dynamic between Newt and his combined black and white soldiers, and what his ideology was in dealing with them?
Well, Newt is, he is a natural leader. He's one of these. He was 6'4", and of course in the 19th century, most men were like 5'7" and weighed about 140 pounds. That was average for the 19th century. And here you have this guy who's 6'4", with piercing black eyes and full beard and, just an imposing countenance and a natural leader. And based upon what I've read, Newt believed that everyone should be treated equal. He did not come from a slave-holding family. There were fewer slaves in Jones County than in any other county in Mississippi in 1860. Jones County had the fewest.
Wow.
So most of the people in Jones County in 1860 were poor, very poor white farmers. Newt was poor, but he has a little more than most. And Newt is also, I've wondered about this, his religion. He was a primitive Baptist. I don't know if you've ever heard of the primitive Baptists, but it was, they're staunch Calvinist, and it was a real egalitarian religion. They treat everyone equal. And so I think that might have something to do with the fact that, Newt was opposed to slavery. Evidence is that primitive Baptists were less likely to own slaves than other groups of Baptists. We were, asked during the movie, well, what evidence do you have that there were African American soldiers with him, deserters with him in the movie or in his company that he formed? Well, my buddy, who was a fellow researcher, his name was Jim Kelly, he found a letter. He found a letter that had been written by a Confederate officer in the edge of Covington County. And this officer had written to the governor of Mississippi, and he's asking for more troops. He wants more troops to come, more soldiers, Confederate soldiers, to come to Jones County, because he says that the deserters are still active. They're still active. They're regrouping. And he says this, and I have it upon good evidence that they also have runaway slaves with them. Okay? So, hey, there's Moses right there. That's Moses was there. He may not have been named Moses, but that's justification for having him there. That was a very important letter. That was the chairman of the history department at Harvard said, this is a major find.
Wow.
This letter that, was written by a Confederate officer, and he says that I have it upon good evidence they have runaway slaves with them. So anyway, there you have Moses.
Okay. So we talked about Newt and his dynamic with the soldiers. Can you speak more on Newt and his relationship with Rachel?
Okay. Yeah, sure. We did not, there several books have been written about Newt Knight and so forth. The first one to be written, or one of the, actually it's the second, was a book that was written in 1951. The name of the book was The Echo of the Black Horn. It was written by this lady. Her name was Ethel Knight, and she wrote this book in 1951, and it's very negative I mean, she basically refers to Newt as nothing but a reprobate. Uh, and he led this revolt against the Confederacy. She basically says that he's nothing but a reprobate, an outlaw, and all of this. But one of the great, which of course, but at the same time, she has a love-hate relationship with him. She says bad things about him, but then she admires him in a lot of ways. But one of the things that she did is she said that while he was, waging his revolt, and he and his men would hide out in the swamps of Jones County, he was aided by this slave woman by the name of Rachel. And she would bring food, and she would bring things like red pepper for them to put out to keep the dogs off their trail. And but of course he was aided by Rachel, and of course this relationship between Newt and Rachel would basically turn into a love affair during the war. And of course they would of course have 5 children together. Now there's Newt also had a white wife too.
Okay.
He was he was a family man, so much so that he had 2 families. But but basically after 1875 he is with Rachel exclusively, and they had 5 children. Now Rachel, I find her to be very fascinating. She came to Jones County in 1855. She was a slave. She was bought by Newt's grandfather. Newt's grandfather was John Jackie Knight. And now, ironically, he was one of the largest slave owners in Jones County. But that's not saying much, because he may have had 12 slaves or something like that. He didn't have that many. But, one of them was Rachel. He bought her in New Augusta, or Augusta at the time, over in what is now Perry County. And there was a slave market there. And he bought her in Augusta. She was probably about 15 or 16 when she comes to Jones County in 1855. And she had an infant child. She had an infant child, and she was pregnant with another child, and from all accounts, Rachel was a very beautiful woman. From all accounts, she was very beautiful. And, she's part African American. There may be a little Native American there, and also, perhaps some European American mixed in with Rachel in her background. But she was apparently beautiful, and she was obviously taken advantage of by her owners and, people like that. But she and Newt will develop a relationship, and it is a love relationship. There is no doubt that they cared deeply for one another. And in fact, when Newt died in 1922, he requested to be buried with Rachel. And where Newt is buried, he is the only white man in that cemetery, and he's with Rachel. And of course, they would have like 5 children together, and he's very devoted to those children, and he has his picture made with them, and so it was a very interesting relationship between Newt and Rachel. She, of course, helps him when he's in the woods and the swamps hiding, as was portrayed in the movie, and of course, it's just a really special relationship they had.
That's awesome.
Very strange for the 19th century.
Yeah,
Very
very
strange for the
strange.
19th century. You know, I can remember back in when I was a freshman in college, I wrote my freshman paper on Nuke Night. You know,
Oh.
I wrote my freshman paper on Nuke Night, and you could tell people that he did things like, he provided food for hungry people. He rescued children out of slavery. Uh, he helped, make it possible for African Americans to vote during Reconstruction.
Hmm.
And you could list all the good things that he did, and of course, someone would inevitably say, yeah, but look what he married. And in other words, like, that negated everything he did. You
Hmm.
know, which uh, see, that's the problem. I think that a lot of people, there are a lot of people that don't like the movie today, and I think one of the reasons is that because Newt crossed the color barrier, you know,
Hmm.
and I think that might be what some people have a problem with today still. But I mean, I can't prove that, but I know when I was a freshman in college, there were people who would talk about that.
Right,
Makes me to believe that probably some talk about it today.
right.
But they were definitely devoted to each other. You know, of course, Rachel died in 1889. She died. She did not live. I think she died when she was 49 or something like that. She died early, and after her death, Newt will take up with her daughter. You remember me telling you about the infant that
Uh-huh.
she had when she came to Jones County? He basically will cohabitate with Georgianne.
Okay.
And Georgianne and Newt will have several children. You know, so Newt is a family.
Yes. That's amazing, especially for that time. Like and I'm glad that they brought that out in the movie. Like they didn't there was no shame in them portraying that in the movie. And I feel like that was very needed in today's like racial climate. Like we have so many racial issues still today, which is I don't think it should be, but it's just so ingrained in our culture. But I look forward to a brighter future where these things don't exist.
Exactly. Mississippi. And keep in mind, I love Mississippi, and I bet you love Mississippi too. But
Hmm.
we are also aware of our history, and
Right.
we also are aware of the fact that we have a legacy of racism. Well,
Hmm.
that's one of the good things about this movie is that it shows that here in the 19th century there was a man and this woman. They fell in love and they had children, and despite the racial hostility of the time. So anyway, in other words, I look upon Newt as being an individual who was fighting for truth, justice, and the American way.
Hmm.
So I think about Newt.
I can agree with that. So one of the most profound moments in the movie for me. So Newt asks the character Moses. He asked him if he was the N word, and Moses responded. He was like, "I'm a free man because you can't own a child of God." And I found that to be like an admission of the most basic right of being a human, like your own inherent freedom. I don't think that parents own their children. Like they're like loaned their children to grow them and to teach them and to raise them into proper individuals, but they don't own that child. Like that child is a free human being.
A
Um,
free moral agent.
Free moral agent. Yes. So I thought that was like a one of the most profound moments.
I thought that was the most powerful moment in the movie.
Nice,
I thought it
nice.
was the most powerful moment in the movie, particularly the way when Mahershala Ali, aka Moses Washington, looked at the camera and he said, "You cannot own a child of God." I thought that was the most powerful moment in the movie.
Yes. So we
And
agree.
yeah, yeah, we do.
Wow. Um, so how do you see race relations in Mississippi, and what can our nation learn from the example of New Knight?
Well, how do I see race relations in Mississippi? Well, we've got a long way to go still.
Hmm.
I think race relations are obviously better, but at the
Yeah.
same time, there's still far too many whites voting Republican for no other reason than the fact that African Americans vote Democratic.
Mm.
You know,
Hmm.
not everybody, but there's some of that. You know,
Hmm.
and you mentioned, I've heard people equate uh, the Democratic Party as the party of the N word.
Oh gosh.
I've heard that. You know, so
Wow.
you still got a long way to go, but
Uh,
there are some good people in Mississippi. There are a lot of good people in Mississippi
yeah.
of both races, and of course, I think things are better, but of course things can still improve.
Hmm. Okay.
Uh, Newt, hey, he's with our state's legacy of segregation and things of this nature. Newt is he's fighting for truth, justice, and the American way. You know, and of course, one of the things that the movie does, or one of the things the movie did, it dealt with the topic of Reconstruction. It dealt with the issue of Reconstruction. The period after the Civil War, which basically lasted from 1865 to 1877. And Newt is very much involved in this. He's very much involved in Reconstruction. In 1866, he was appointed by Union Army. The Union Army is occupying Mississippi in 1866. The war is over. In 1866, he was appointed as a relief commissioner, by a Union officer. And his job is to distribute food to destitute people. That's what a relief commissioner would have done. In 1870, he is appointed as an assistant United States Marshal. All right, now what would he have been doing as an assistant United States Marshal in 1870? He would have been helping to register African Americans to vote. During Reconstruction, especially radical Reconstruction, which lasted basically from 1867 to 1877, African Americans would be politically active.
Mm.
African Americans would be politically active. And of course, they would support the Republican Party because the Republican Party was the party of Lincoln, the great emancipator.
Hmm.
And of course, they were politically active, and Newt is trying to help that process. See, the whole purpose of Reconstruction was to try to make southern states, or try to make the South part of America. You know, uh, and of course, that was the goal of Reconstruction, to give African Americans the right to vote, make them citizens, and like everybody else.
Hmm.
And of course, Reconstruction was killed. It was killed basically by a counter-revolution that was led by the Ku Klux Klan. they essentially killed Reconstruction, you know.
Mm.
And, by 1877, Reconstruction's dead. And of course, what happens? African Americans lose all of their political gains that they made, and of course, it would take the 1960s. That's when we will have a second Reconstruction, in the
Okay.
1960s. And of course, Lyndon Johnson, who was the American president, who basically completed Reconstruction. It had been started by President Kennedy. Of course, President Kennedy was assassinated. He was followed by President Johnson. And, President Johnson, what two monumental pieces of legislation did he get through Congress? In 1964, he got the Civil Rights Act passed. That prohibited discrimination in public facilities. Civil Rights Act of 64. And then in 1965, the Voting Rights Act was passed. And that, of course, basically enabled African Americans to get the right to vote finally.
Mm-hmm.
First attempt here in Reconstruction failed, but of course the second Reconstruction in the 1960s would be more successful.
Okay.
One other point about Rachel that I think is very cool. In 1876, Newt deeded Rachel 160 acres of land. He deeded her 160 acres of land. That would make her one of the first female African American landowners in Mississippi.
Oh, wow.
Deeds her 160 acres of land. Why did he do that? Well, he loves her, but he also thinks that he's probably, because of what all he's done, that he's probably going to be killed. He thinks that the Klan's going to kill me, or whatever. And there were attempts to kill him, but he will outlive all of those. But he deeded Rachel 160 acres of land because he figured that if she had land, she could take care of herself. She had land, she could make it. She could take care of herself in the event that he was not there.
Mm-hmm.
And now, so he did that in 1876. And of course, his white wife, Serena, is still living on the same place too, in two different houses. You saw the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And but she pretty much eventually leaves.
Okay.
Got the picture eventually.
Okay.
But Newt is a fascinating character.
Yes, he is. um, so so I want to also discuss a little about, since we're talking about war, this kind of thing, gun violence, the gun violence that we experience in America. It seems like every other day there's a shooting in one of our schools or a public place, or someone is getting killed because of this gun violence. And I was just wondering, what are your views on the gun violence that we're experiencing, and do you have any ideas on how we might be able to get it under control?
I wish I had an answer.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I believe in the Second Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
There is a pretty good argument that there is a right to own firearms.
Yeah.
There is, that's in the Second Amendment. And I support the Second Amendment. I have guns. I like to shoot guns.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, I occasionally go hunting, but I'm not much of a hunter, but I will go occasionally. I kill a deer about every 3 years or so. But, there's a good argument that there's a right to own guns. Now, I don't know what the answer is. I do know that I don't oppose things like, the waiting list, the background check. I'm all for that.
Mhm.
I have no problem with, and this makes a lot of people mad about, doing away with the assault weapons. You know,
Mhm.
those have only been legal since 2002.
Okay.
The assault weapons, you know,
Mhm.
or 2002 or 2004, one of the two. Uh, you know, and before people criticize me, they need to also remember that Ronald Reagan was opposed to assault weapons. He basically said that no one needs an assault weapon. That's basically Ronald Reagan said that. You know,
Mhm.
so before any of my conservative friends, criticize me too much, they need to remember that. Um, but I I have no problem. I mean, I don't have an assault weapon, and I have no problem with the background checks and things of that nature. But I still really don't know what the solution is. I,
Yeah.
there are mentally disturbed people that don't need to have weapons like that, and there are mentally disturbed people in other countries in the world too, like England and South Korea and Israel and France and
Mhm.
Finland and Sweden, and they don't have mass shootings like we have here.
Mm.
And if you notice, like most of the mass shootings have involved assault weapons.
Right.
Like the
Right.
guy in Las Vegas. You remember that? Uh,
At the was it a was it like a
concert.
festival concert? Mhm.
Concert. I don't believe that any individual, unless you're in the United States Army, needs a weapon that enables you to shoot 150 people in less than 10 minutes.
Mhm.
You know, now that just sounds weird to me. I mean, I don't think you need something like that. You know,
Mhm.
but as far as your handguns, your hunting weapons, I have no problem with that. I've got all kinds of guns, but
Mhm.
at the same time, something needs to be done.
Right. Right. I feel like if we at least need to try to do some things. Like it'll evolve and the process will evolve as long as we get it in motion, but not doing anything is not gonna get us anywhere. But
Precisely. We need to
yeah,
do something.
we need to
You know,
do something. Yeah.
we need to do something. Ban assault weapons or the extended magazines or whatever.
Mhm.
Uh, and people get upset when they hear that, but it's my opinion. They can get over it or they
Yeah,
won't.
times are changing. Like people are
Yeah,
changing, values are changing. We have to adapt to those changes with our uh, gun gun control or whatever surrounds how people get guns.
right,
I
right.
just so. But anyway, let's move on to something fun,
Okay,
more fun than what we've been talking about. Music. So,
okay.
what are your musical interests?
I love music. I love music. When I'm not reading, I listen to music. I think
Mhm.
I've got like 4,000 songs on my iPod. You know,
Yes.
uh, what kind of music do I like? I don't limit myself to one genre, but
Mhm.
at the same time, I'm pretty much the old school guy. You know, I think we
Okay.
identify with the music of our youth. You
Mhm.
know, I think throughout our lives, we identify with the music of our youth. I like
Mhm.
classic rock. I like classic R&B. I like
Okay.
classic country. You
Okay.
know, I like classical music. That's I could always listen to classical music when I was studying for a test. I couldn't
Yeah.
listen to anything else, but you know, I could listen to classical music. I could
Yeah.
always uh, listen to that. Um, who do I like?
Yeah. What?
Uh,
Who are your top five music artists?
Okay, there are so many, but um, there are so many. Uh, the Rolling Stones.
Rolling
I
Stones.
love the
Okay.
Rolling Stones. I've seen them 3 times. The
Nice.
Rolling Stones. Uh, Pink Floyd.
Pink Floyd. Okay.
Floyd. I like Led Zeppelin. I like Marvin Gaye.
Okay.
I like Jackson Brown, and I could name 30 others, but
I
that's
know
the
you
first five
could.
that came to mind.
Okay. Okay. And just for listeners of this show, what are your top 5 songs that maybe they can explore and
Top
check
five.
out?
Okay, Give Me Shelter,
Give me shelter.
Rolling Stones. Keith Richards wrote that in 20 minutes, I think. Uh, Give Me Shelter, Tumbling Dice. That's another song by the Rolling Stones. Uh, uh, What's Going On, Marvin Gaye. That's the best. That's the best R&B album that's ever been made. Are you familiar with that?
I know that song. I've
Mm-hmm.
heard that song.
You need to listen to the CD. It's the
Okay.
same name. What's going on?
Okay.
Other songs. Oh my! There are so many. I love "Across the Universe" by the Beatles. You know,
Okay, yeah, I like that one.
I love uh, "The Pretender" by Jackson Brown. You know, uh, I love Led Zeppelin's fourth album. I love every song on there. Uh, I'm listening to this. I don't listen to much contemporary stuff, but
Hmm.
there are a couple of contemporary artists that I do listen to a little bit. Most of my listening is old school still, but
Hmm.
there's this group that's from Chicago, uh, Wilco. That's a group. They have good lyrics. They write good lyrics. And of course, it's one of President Obama's favorite groups, Wilco.
Okay.
So we'll check out some of that. Uh, Rock loves Wilco. Uh, and there's this husband and wife team. They haven't made it to the big time yet, but they're flirting with it. They're a husband and wife. She's originally from Mississippi. They go by the name of Shovels and Rope, you know.
Okay.
And I just discovered them accidentally. And, like last year, and I find myself listening to them a lot. It's just, they've got like 3 albums, 3 or 4 albums, and I've seen them in concert,
Okay.
once. I sat by the lady's grandmother at the concert. And so that was, and
Nice.
so those are just some of my people I listening to, and of course, you've got to put Bob Dylan in there. I grew up listening to Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan should probably be, his lyrics should probably be in the Old Testament as a lesser prophet. You know, uh, uh, if you've ever looked at his lyrics and read his
Uh,
lyrics,
uh,
definitely an Old Testament prophet. You know,
okay. Okay. I love your jokes. You're so awesome. Okay. Well, I mean, that's it. That's all the questions I have for you.
well,
Um,
you think of anything else, I'm here.
all right. So thank you so much, and thank you for being a guest, and I hope you have a great day.
Well, I enjoyed doing this and love being with my former student. So, anyway, you take care, darling.
All right, you too.
All right, I love you.
Love you too.
All right, bye bye.
All right, bye bye.